Shit, where did my- There we go.
Now we lost the chairman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I can't hear anybody.
No? Can you hear me?
Hey, Mike, I hear you.
I hear you, Mike.
I can hear you.
Yeah, my mic was off. I don't know why. It started off as on, but now it's off. So
Not showing muted.
can you hear us, Mike?
No, he can't.
No. Mike, can you hear me? I can hear everybody. I can too.
Yeah.
I can also.
I hear everybody too. It's awesome.
He's not showing muted. I don't know.
What's going on?
I can hear
You're
him.
here now.
All right,
Mike?
I hear him.
He was there for a second.
What if it's people's volume is down?
Might be his speakers setting or something on his computer.
Maybe. Mike?
You should log out and back in.
Huh.
Am I the only one who can't hear anything? Oh, this
Yes.
is great.
Yes. Still cannot hear, I suppose, huh? I'm going to send him a text to try to advise him to sign off and sign back on. Maybe that's my go-to tech move.
Okay.
Same as system.
Very 1995 of us. That's what I would do as well.
The funny thing is, in 90% of circumstances, it seems to work.
It still works.
Okay, let me get out of here.
Hi, John. We're having some technical difficulty. We'll be there in a minute.
No problem, Noreen. Thanks.
Is Mr. Leeper here?
I don't know. I don't. Oh, yes, he is.
Yeah, he's always quiet, though. He doesn't ever want to talk.
Good evening.
Hello,
Hi,
Mike.
Mike.
Mike, can you
I
hear us
still don't
now?
hear anything.
Oh,
I
no.
don't know what's going on here. I don't change any of the settings and I get a different result each time I log on.
Maybe you should just call in.
I'm gonna call him on the phone now. See
Yeah,
what-
call him up. Tell him just call in.
Yeah.
So we can see him.
Yeah, leave his computer on and then call on his phone.
This is great.
Excuse me.
Courtney.
Hello, David. Oh. No, I checked all of that stuff and it seems to be fine. Although I don't hear anything. You know, all the tests I've run, it says it's fine, but I'm not hearing anything. All right, I'll. Okay. Okay, I will dial in and also be online with my computer. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. I will be with you all in just a moment.
Just needs to make sure that he mutes his mic on the computer. He's gonna get feedback.
Yeah.
Well, Dave should be able to mute him, I think.
I should be able to. Sometimes I can't.
Telephone.
Yes, I can mute him. Mike, is that you? Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so I apologize for the IT screw up at the beginning of the meeting. If everybody else is online and ready to begin, we should begin with a roll call tonight. Noreen,
Mike Murphy,
here.
Peter Lewis,
Here.
Kevin Scully,
Present.
and Austin Said.
I'm here.
That's everybody, right? And Aaron, of course, is out.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So we have a quorum.
Yes.
I begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
Pledge
to the
allegiance.
flag
Flag of the United States of America
to the republic for
Republic,
which
which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty,
and justice.
justice for all.
So I welcome you all to the Town of Monroe ZBA meeting for October 27th, 2020. We only have a few items on the agenda tonight. And starting out with is a new project. It's DG Management. And this is a subdivision that was referred to us from the Town of Monroe Planning Board, and they come seeking 2 area variances for their new subdivision application. Is there anybody here tonight that would like to represent the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, good evening. John Queenan from Lankin Tully Engineering, engineer for the applicant. Mike, how are you?
Good.
Good. So good evening. As Mr. Chairman had noticed, we're before the planning board right now currently with a residential subdivision that is, we've been there for quite some time, probably over a year, working with the planning board and going through the subdivision process. The property is located on a Rico Terrace with limited access to a 9.5 acre parcel. It's located in the SR10 zoning district, otherwise known as basically section block and lot 1-1-96. I don't know if the board would like me to share the map. We'll get into that a little later, but essentially what the planning board and the subdivision process in the town code requires is that you go through a multi-step process. And the first process is to prepare a conventional subdivision plan that basically conforms to the zoning, so that you're just doing a standard conventional subdivision plan to see what the property is able to yield for the number of lots. We went through several iterations of that, and finally at the end, the planning board resolved that a total of 15 conventional lots could be possibly constructed on the property without variances. That would be as of right per the zoning code today. The second aspect of the subdivision process with the planning board is then the planning board looks at possibly clustering. And it's one of the requirements that they must look at and see that if it's makes for a better plan overall. So the second part of it is once they've determined the number of maximum lots that can be yielded, which is 15, you then turn and you do a cluster plan. Now the cluster plan for the property requires that 50% of the gross acreage be reserved as open space. So in our case, we have a total of 9.5 acres. So under the cluster provisions, we'll be required to provide 4.75 acres of open space. All right. So when we do our arrangement of our cluster plan, we're supposed to provide that 50%. That's the first variance we'd be seeking. Because what happens on this property is actually very unique. It's got a significant amount of area that's encumbered by an existing Orange and Rockland utility easement. Slightly over 4 acres is a utility easement. Back and forth with the planning board and the applicant, the planning board determined that they could not consider the land under the easement as open space for various reasons. Ultimately, because there's no actual control of it. It's controlled by the utility company. So if you wanted to do plantings or whatever else there, it would be restricted in that regard. We went back and forth a little bit, but at the end of the day, they said, no, we can't consider that open space. So the problem therein lies is that the 50% clustering open space requirement is based on the gross acreage, no matter what encumbrances are on the property. So right off the bat, the property loses over 4 acres of possible open space for nothing, because I'd still take it off the 9.5. So I'm getting deducted twice is how it ended up. So
Yeah.
in reality,
that 4 acres is being utilized already for a utility easement. So, you know, even though they own 9 acres, they really bought 5 usable acres. You know, that's another
Correct.
way to look.
but at the same time, like if you look at it, wetlands are considered part of open space, but you can't use them. So somebody could buy a property that's got 10 acres and 5 of it could be encumbered by a wetland, which you can't build on, but you can take credit for that as open space. So I would consider that the same. It's the same,
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, the
Well, it is.
utility easement, the roadway with power lines, it gets maintained. There's no trees out there, so it doesn't really have that environmentally compensating element to it. It's not like you're saving the forest by.
No, but there's
Or-
nothing in the zoning code that says that open space has to be forested. It can just be that. It can just be open. But my argument isn't what is open and what is not. We've moved on, and that's why we're before your board. But I look at it that I can buy the same piece of property that could be encumbered by wetlands. It has wetlands, and you can never build on it. Just like under the power line easement, you can never be built on. But in the wetland scenario, I can take credit for it, but in our scenario, I can't. So essentially,
wetland environmental benefits.
some wetlands, no. But essentially, that's our first variance that we're asking for. We've gone
Okay.
through a lengthy process with the planning board. The planning board is the board that decides conventional or cluster, okay? Through the iterations,
John, just a quick question. You can't take credit for the easement? Is that what you're saying?
that's correct.
So what is that? That's a 4.5 acre easement?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
like
what is
4.1.
that? What is it, about 140 feet wide?
It's 150-foot wide utility easement.
And the reason, and so that would remain as open space technically?
Yes, it would remain as it is today.
Right. And that's half of the property?
Yes.
Okay. It seems strange that you wouldn't be able to take that into account in terms of open space though.
Well,
Would the utility company have
for
the
the
ability to
utility-
put something there?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Would the utility company have the right to put something in there, a road or whatever?
I don't believe so without the owner's permission. Because the utility company just has an easement. They don't actually own the property.
Right.
So they have an easement for, utility lines. Anything else that they would look to seek to put there, they would have to get the property owner's approval to do so, just like they had gotten for the easement.
John, it's Dave McCartney talking, just as lawyer. I didn't see, and I might have just overlooked it. What is the actual variance you're looking for? What is the percentage that you provide? I know 50% is required and you're going to provide less than that, but what's the actual percentage?
20%.
It would be 17% from the 50. So we are able to provide 1.64 acres of open space in lieu of the 4.75.
And have you submitted a copy of the easement, paperwork so the board can take a look at what the easement provisions are for the utility?
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably on file with the planning board, but I can certainly get it to the zoning board specifically. No problem.
Okay.
So it's essentially how we ended up with the planning board is in the conventional layout, we had 15 single family lots on a cul-de-sac road. Cul-de-sac was approximately somewhere in the range of 915 feet long. In the cluster layout, we end up with 9 lots and about 100-foot shorter cul-de-sac. It's around 815 feet. And what the cluster plan does is enables you to do 1 family and 2 family houses. So that's how we're able to go from the number 15 down to 9 lots, but still utilize 15 units on the parcel. And we're able to shorten the cul-de-sac road up by 100 feet. And thus we're able to provide an open space area that in discussions with the planning board, they wanted a visual buffer between Orico Terrace and 208 looking up the hill. So that's why we've pulled, if you look at the map, we pulled all the lots in and we're able to provide like an open space around, I'll say, the back end of the cul-de-sac. That's where the main open space is. Then that connects to the easement that goes along the entire length of the property. And then there's a smaller open space area behind lot number 1 that is significantly wooded at this point, and the planning board would like to keep it that way. because there's a neighbor directly, I'll say south of it, that if we were to clear it, then, you know, you'd see into each other's backyard. So they wanted to keep that little piece buffered.
Now, John, you bring up an interesting concept here about significantly wooded. I've seen aerial photographs of this area, and it seems like it's significantly cleared already.
The majority of the property was cleared probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, so they cleared it before coming in for subdivision application. I wonder if they had an application for cutting trees at that time.
I don't believe.
The other question I have is, you know, you mentioned your cul-de-sac is on the order of 900 to 1,000 feet long. I guess the conventional was 1,000. Your clustered plan is 900 feet long. Town of Monroe has a 500-foot limit on cul-de-sac lengths. How have you dealt with that? What mitigation have you offered to the planning board on that front?
Well, the conventional plan was 900 and I think 15 feet long. And there is limited access to this property. This property only has frontage on Arico Terrace. And as you drive up Arico Terrace, it's basically the property on the right-hand side, which is the solid rock face, probably a 30 or 40-foot jump. It's an infeasible location to get any sort of access from. There's no other access. There's no other frontage to this parcel. So the applicant went through a long process with both Orange and Rockland and neighboring property owners to attempt to get access to this parcel. Our discussions with Orange and Rockland really didn't go anywhere. They're not interested in any sort of public road traversing their easement. So the applicant was able to secure access from a subdivision through parcels in the village of Monroe that was bringing up a cul-de-sac. And so they partnered together and said, we'll probably in the future like to extend this. So the village, in conjunction with the applicant in the town, proposed a temporary cul-de-sac that comes from Scunnamunk Road up to the property. And then when our parcel is developed, that cul-de-sac would be abandoned and then extended. So the justification, the planning board granted a waiver in the conventional plan for the 900-foot long cul-de-sac, because in order to get to the property from the access that was secured, I believe the length was over 400 feet just to get to the property boundary. So we technically were only adding another 400, 450 feet within the town portion just to get viable access to the property. So that went through the planning board. We did have long discussions with the planning board, and at the end, they did grant the waiver in the conventional layout for it. And then when we came to the cluster plan for that, the planning board was happy to see that the road length got even shorter. Now it's around 815 feet, I believe. So it's 100 feet shorter. We did sit with the highway superintendent and went over the plan with him. He didn't have any objections as long as the road was built to the town standard and provided for, your typical turnaround at the end meeting town code. So that's how we've dealt with the cul-de-sac length. And it's really just a function of, before we even reach the property boundary, we're over 400 feet, to get there. So that was kind of the relief that we went over with the planning board. And also just to get to the point, to get to that access and get that access, squared away was a long process. And it also is, we feel, was a better access point because now everyone in that area will be consolidated to the one driveway cut to Scunnamunk rather than having multiple. So you would have had multiple driveways coming out to Scunnamunk Road from the village subdivision, from our parcel, and from Arico Terrace. So now everybody is contained on one road.
Who's going to maintain the road in the future, being it's half in the village and half in the town? Did those conversations occur, or?
We just started those conversations, and that's going to be an agreement between the village and the town as to who wants, probably the village, I would assume, because they have to plow the first 400 feet. So there'll probably be an intermunicipal agreement that the village would continue to plow to the end, would be my guess. But we have to work that out down the road.
Is it just one variant you're looking for or two?
No, there's a second variance in the code that requires that open space be 75 feet from a rear yard. And this variance we're seeking is just for lot 1. It's that flag lot that has that little buffer piece that we don't meet the 75 feet. It does not apply to any of the other lots because the open space is not on the lots. So this is specifically for lot number 1 to go from the 75 feet to provide for a 25-foot rear yard to the open space.
John, do you have a way to share the map with us? Can you
Yes.
project
Yep.
on the screen, see what's
Sure.
happening here?
No problem. You want to see the conventional first or the cluster?
Yeah, let's see the conventional to see how you got to where you are.
Okay. So just to get everybody familiar, this is Orico Terrace over here, if everybody can see, correct? Here's Orico Terrace coming down. 208 is over here. Scunnamunk Road is right here. So as you can see, our property is this parcel here. So the only road frontage it has is here on Orico Terrace. It doesn't touch Scunnamunk at any other location. Just for reference, right here would be the firehouse in the corner of 208 and Scunnamunk.
Hmm.
So currently in the village, this cul-de-sac was approved for a 3-lot subdivision. So the applicant approached these owners and asked if in the future, we could possibly extend this, discussed it with the village. The village said, we don't have an issue. We get rid of a cul-de-sac that's temporary in nature and extend it through. No problem, but you have to get your approvals. So this was the basis of getting the access. So we take this is about a 450-foot stretch, and this is our cul-de-sac in, terminates here, and basically we have single-family lots around it, and then there's one lot that with a driveway that is able to go through the easement out to Scunnamunk. This plan was reviewed exhaustively by the planning board, and as part of the process of that, for a conventional layout, you have to pretty much engineer the plan. So this plan was brought up, it was graded out, there was a lot of detail put into this plan to make sure that these lots were viable. So all of that was created. Now this is the easement of the power line. It's basically this whole thing here, all the way from Orico Terrace all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 150-foot wide easement. So in the conventional layout, we're okay. Houses are out of it, driveway access road. This layout meets the zoning, doesn't require any variances. So that's how we ended up confirming this number of lots. We had some alternate plans that had another lot. So we had 16 lot layout. We went back and forth. We ultimately settled on the 15, and everyone felt comfortable that this is the yield for the property. And then, like I said, as part of the subdivision process, you have to provide a cluster plan, and then it's up to the planning board to choose which plan they prefer. So I will bring up the cluster plan. If anybody has any questions on this before I do that.
Yeah, so the easement goes from the end of this driveway over here all the way.
The easement goes, our property line is here. So
Got
it continues, but the easement goes from here up and all the way over, and then it's this whole area here.
Right, and this current configuration doesn't require any variances.
That is correct.
Okay.
So the driveway that you have on that one lot that runs down along the O&R easement, that's crossing over somebody else's parcel. You got an easement from the neighbor to do that?
That is correct, yes. As part of prior subdivisions, they reserved a 10-foot wide private driveway easement that was approved by Orange and Rockland to service this one lot.
Okay.
Let me just get out of this. Go back.
Well, just John, quick on that one, back to that.
Yeah.
So how does that solve the open space issue if you still can't use the easement for that previous conventional one?
Open space is not required on a conventional subdivision plan. It's only
Okay,
required on a cluster.
So a cluster,
Correct. Once you go to a cluster, that's the whole thing, is you want to cluster the lots down and keep open space. So there is no requirement for open space on a conventional layout.
okay.
So this before you is the cluster layout. So here's Orico Terrace here, here's Scunnamunk, here's the cul-de-sac from the village, and essentially we've created a smaller cul-de-sac here, whereas before it was ending over here and we had lots wrapping around here. It ends shorter. Some of these are 1 and 2 family. It's a mix of single family, 2 family. And you go around, and then what's shaded here is our open space that's, I guess, permitted by code. And then what isn't shaded is all the easement area. And then when you come back here, lot 1 is the lot that's a flag lot that's allowed under the clustering, but we wanted to keep this piece here because this is still wooded and it provides buffer to this property owner's rear yard. And so that's why this is where the 75 feet would apply. So instead of being 75 feet with this, and all that would do is just reduce that, we've just made this essentially a 25-foot rear yard. So that's where the 75 to 25 comes in. And then the open space, again, is just this area here plus this area, because you can't take credit for the easement. It's a very unique parcel. It's a very unique situation. And I know probably everybody who comes to the zoning board says the same thing, but it really is. And the concentration that the planning board would like to see is this area here. As part of the planning process, we're going to have to go through a significant planting and landscaping plan because of the prior tree clearing. We wanted to get as much space here as possible for that, so that the view shed from 208 and Orico is buffered from this. And then as you're coming down Scunnamunk, there's all the buildings are already here. You won't be able to see up past this. So that essentially is what we're trying to accomplish here.
Now, can you go over again that 75-foot private yard requirement that's being reduced to 35 foot?
Sure, it's actually 25. So in the code, it requires that open space must be 75 feet away from a private rear yard. Okay, so lot 1 in this scenario is proposed to own all of the open space, all of the easement area, all the way around. Somebody has to own it. And we felt that it was probably easier to just have one lot own it all rather than all 9 lots own a piece. It's easier to control. So in that scenario, I can't provide the 75 feet because I would lose another 50 feet of proposed open space. And we would like to keep that wooded. So what we've done is ask for the relief on that lot. Where it doesn't apply is, say, for instance, lot 7 here. Since lot 7's property line is here, it doesn't apply here because it's not on the same lot. So that's why that yard requirement only applies to lot 1, to the rear yard of lot 1.
Oh, okay, because it's attached.
Correct.
To
Because
the,
at one
if
point,
all of these lots were attached to the open space, they would have that same problem?
that's correct. That's correct. So if lot 7, went back to here and owned this, you couldn't start the open space until you were 75 feet away. Because we had initially proposed buffer here on 8 and 9, but again that same requirement applied, so we essentially removed it from the application.
Hi, this is Austin Side. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it may not be desirable, but you could probably move the stormwater management area into the proposed open space and legitimately conserve some of that area, right, within the 75-foot diameter off of the lot 2. But I don't think it would be desirable.
No, and I don't think, and I'm not sure, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think we can put stormwater in the open space. But
Yeah.
No. I'm not saying to put stormwater in the open space. I'm saying that if you were to pull a 75-foot radius circle off the corner of the house on lot 2, you would probably be able to clip some of that stormwater management area as open space that would be legitimately away from the house on 1 and 2. So you'd be able to use that as the open space and then shift the stormwater management area back to the space next to the house on lot 1, because you don't have the 75-foot restriction on stormwater management areas. You only have it on open space.
I see.
Although that would make sense and work, well, let's not say it would make sense. Although that would work, I don't think it would be desirable.
No, because this we'd like to maintain because of the buffer here with the residents here, and this is our low point. So,
Right, and that's you want to be able to get the water off the roadway to your stormwater management area.
correct.
So adjacent to the road at a low point is the ideal place for that. But,
So that essentially is why we're, before the board now. The planning board has chosen the cluster. They prefer the cluster, and overall the cluster is the better plan. It provides less road. It provides more flexibility. It does provide more open space, and we would meet the open space requirement if the easement area.
What's on the easement area now?
Basically utility line, power utility transmission line.
Oh, so there's actual power lines on those.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, do you know the power lines that pass through Harriman Business Park?
Yeah.
This is where they begin,
Oh, okay.
or pass, yeah, so
Yeah.
kind of continue through there.
Pole, and then
So nothing could ever be constructed back there at this, under,
Right.
but
that essentially is our application to the board.
One question that I have, having been with the planning board in the past, when people came to us with applications where they had these long cul-de-sacs, we often look for preserving right-of-ways for interconnecting roadways to other parcels as a terms of mitigation for the long cul-de-sac. I don't see anything like that being offered here.
It's infeasible. I can't get out to Arico Terrace here. It's the grade is just
Right,
much.
I can see that.
And
Well,
Orange and Rockland will in no way, shape, or form allow any crossing of this easement. We worked with them for almost well over a year on all different alternatives for access, and they denied all of them except for the 10-foot driveway easement. That's all.
Well, they ultimately approved all of Harriman Business Park under their easement, so they are flexible. But anyway, the length of the cul-de-sac.
Mike, they told me after 9/11 they allow nothing in easements anymore.
Oh.
So, but I would agree with you. Not here.
Okay. The length of the cul-de-sac is not a matter that's before the ZBA. That's a determination between the planning board and the highway superintendent. I just asked it because, I see there are a lot of things going on here. You've got what was 9 acres of property, but it really wasn't because there was 4 acres of utility line easement that you can't touch. So whoever the applicant was, they really only bought 5 acres of usable property. Sometimes you have to start at that as a base point.
I don't disagree with you, except that in the conventional layout, by right, without a variance, we have 15 lots.
Yeah.
So, it's the provision in the code that requires clustering, and then at the end of the process, it's solely up to the planning board as to which plan they feel is beneficial. It's not our choice. It's part of the process there, and going through it, they felt that this cluster layout was the more beneficial layout at this time for the development, rather than the conventional.
Is there anything holding the houses at the footprints that are shown there, or can these houses be expanded to touch all of the building envelope lines? That's something we see frequently. We come in with a standard footprint for a building, and then we end up these things getting built right up to the edges.
Yeah, right now with the planning board, we're just at this point right here, and we wanted to come to your board in order to determine or get a feel for the variances, because we don't want to really continue too much farther along and not
right. If you're not going to get the variance.
For right now, Mike, to answer your question, yeah, we put generic boxes on here. The planning board has asked for specific building footprints and architecturals to be reviewed as part of their process. So I believe all that'll be worked out in detail. But right now our limiting factor is just the development coverage for each lot. And in this scenario, all of these lots are 10,000 square foot lots. They're not reduced from the SR 10 requirement. So let me just touch upon where we are with the planning board. The planning board has sent out notice for lead agency. I'm not sure if the ZBA received it yet.
Yeah.
Yes, we have it.
Got it.
Okay. We will be doing this as a coordinated review, meaning that this board can't make any sort of a determination or approval until the planning board completes its secret process. So we did it that way because I wanted to make sure that as we were going back and forth between the boards, if there's any sort of changes, that both boards are kept up to date. And in case something happens that we have to change a lot, or we add more area, or area has to come off for whatever reason, that potentially we didn't have variances, obtained for a different amount, and we'd have to come back again. So we're kind of doing this hopefully on a simultaneous basis, going back and forth with both your board and the planning board.
Okay, so this is kind of a moving target at this point. Part of our process is to hold a public hearing on the matter also. To grant the zoning variances, we have to hold a public hearing. So the question is, at what point in this process do we hold that public hearing?
That's correct.
And that might be my question to David.
Yeah, and just so you know, we're just starting, the process with your board. So really for tonight, I just wanted to get everybody introduced to the project, let you know what the variances we were seeking, and take any feedback you may have on this plan. And then we would go back to the planning board, keep working on the design and our seeker process. And then, we'll be back in front of your board as that, moves along. That's how I had it in my head.
Okay.
How much coordination would we have with the planning board, Mike? Is that something, obviously this is something they're requesting. And I know in the referral letter, they stated their desire to weigh in on the process, right?
Sorry, so I've been muted. I've been trying to talk several times. This is Dave McCartney. I'm trying to chime in here. For some reason, my computer was locked up. I couldn't not unmute myself. Yeah, so Peter, to answer your question, just as part of the overall process here, the planning board has sent out this notice of intent to be lead agency. The first step is for this board, if this board is okay with that and and wants to consent to the planning board acting as lead agency, there needs to be a motion and a second to authorize the chairman to sign the consent form that was sent over that would consent to the planning board serving in that capacity. Then the planning board can continue with the secret process, and your board can open a public hearing. You just can't act on it. You cannot make a decision. That would be an action. You cannot take an action on it until the planning board has completed its secret process. Doesn't mean the planning board has to complete its subdivision review. It just has to complete secret. And once it completes secret, then you could complete the public hearing and issue a decision.
Okay.
Like I said, in terms of input from the planning board, is that something that we would desire to have, Mike?
Well, we could always send them a letter, with our thoughts on it once we've had a chance to, kind of digest this plan. John gave us an overview of how they got to where they are, what the plan looks like. We each have a copy of the cluster plan that they're looking to pursue. I mean, if we want to put together a list of questions or concerns and transmit that to the planning board, we could certainly do that.
Yeah,
So-
that's exactly what I'd be looking for. So we can further this design and then come back to, keep coming back, ultimately ending hopefully with the seeker conclusion and then ending with your public hearing closure.
Okay. So I guess my biggest question, David, is when do we want to open a public hearing on this matter?
You know, it's really it's at your convenience, and it's at your discretion when to open it. Again, the only restriction is not the opening of it; it's the closing of it and actually coming to an action, a decision granting or denying. I know in the letter of referral, the planning board has asked for the ability to chime in and be heard before the zoning board on the variance application. So really there's a mutual request for input and to have input into each other's process. So I think you can open a public hearing, you know, whenever you see fit. You know, by the way, as part of the SECRA process, you know, you're permitted to send along preliminary issues of environmental concern that you'd like to point out to the planning board if you have any, in consenting to them serving as lead agency. That doesn't necessarily mean areas of, you know, substantive change to their review. It's areas of potential environmental concern. If you have anything in particular that you want them to pay attention to, you can send that along in the consent form, assuming that you're going to consent. But again, so
on that point about the planning board's notice of lead agency, we have that as the last item on our agenda tonight.
Well, you can talk about it at the same time. I was told to make sure I remembered to bring it up at the meeting tonight.
it would be natural to deal with it right now, not later.
Or we could have John Queen and sit back and listen to the next applicant, the Verizon application. It's always a 3-hour event. So, John, I don't know what you plan for the evening.
I don't think my kids or my wife would be very happy with that. They're all huddled downstairs being quiet.
Okay. Has anybody read the notice of lead agency from the planning board? I did not get to that.
Yeah, I tried to look at it, but it was microscopic on my screen.
I did. I looked at it. It's standard. It's a standard form notice. All the standard language, basically just explaining what the action is, that it's what it's done so far in SECRA, that it's conducting a coordinated review, that it's an unlisted action, and it's sending the same notice out to all involved agencies, which include the New York State Historic Preservation Office, the DOT, the Army Corps, DEC, the Monroe Joint Fire District, the Building Department, the Monroe Woodbury Central School District. I'm sorry, those are interested agencies. The involved agencies are this board, the Village of Monroe, Orange County Environmental, Orange County Department of Health, and the state DEC. So everyone's getting one of these notices, and then it's just asking you to send back a form that says either you consent that the planning board serve as lead agency, or that you do not consent. And if you consent, you're also requesting that the zoning board continue to be notified on filings and hearings. So you're interested and you're involved and you're aware of what's going on at the planning board, which of course you would be as a matter of course here anyway, because the applicant would be back and forth between the two boards, as we go forward.
David, this is Austin Side. I had a question. Considering that letter is silent on whether or not the planning board is, I would say the word endorsing the application, it seems like when you're working on a cluster development that the planning board is the agency that's essentially supposed to select whether they choose a conventional or a cluster development as the preferred method of developing that property. Would you say that the planning board is endorsing one or the other?
They have not. No, they have not said that in their referral letter. In their referral letter, they're simply identifying the issue. That the application, where are we? And these are the rules, and this is why they're there. This is why they're there at the planning board. This is why they're coming to the zoning board. And it states specifically, you will receive a notice of intent on the SECRA issue under separate cover. Additionally, the planning board may want an opportunity to weigh in on the variance application after further discussion. and will follow up with a subsequent comment letter in that event.
Is
So
is the goal to arrive at a conventional and a cluster development that, I mean, ideally, that are compliant in all respects? Is that what they're trying to do? Are they, are they trying to say, look, we have two options that are compliant, and one may be more environmentally friendly because it conserves open space, therefore it may be more desirable. It may have other desirable features, and in order to arrive at that, they have to have they have to have an approval by the ZBA to have two viable concepts of developing the lots.
well, they're not looking for, I don't think they're looking for approval for two viable alternatives. From what I'm understanding from John and what I'm reading between the lines on the letter, the typical way that this would be happening is that the applicant would go to the planning board, just as John had described. The first step is to show them how many units could get with a conventional. And if the applicant is happy with the conventional and the planning board's happy with the conventional, well, then that's where it stays. And you never go, I mean, I guess you have to look at the cluster, but if the conventional is the one that the planning board is telling the applicant, hey, we like the conventional, the applicant wouldn't be spending the money, nor would the planning board be sending them here on the secondary cluster alternative. So basically what I'm reading is that they've developed the cluster plan. It's got some traction with the planning board. They've looked at it a bit. They realize, that it's a viable plan, but only if they have a variance, because it's totally not viable at all if this board is not amenable to issuing the variance. So whether or not the planning board is saying out loud in their referral letter, hey, we really like the cluster development, and then sending the applicant or not, I can't tell, but I don't think the applicant would be here unless it wasn't gaining some traction reading between the lines. So, before they go on with the further planning process that would be required to actually approve a cluster development, they can't go any further. Really, it wouldn't make sense for them to go further if this board isn't, sort of inclined to get into the issue of variance on these 2 points. John, do I have that? Have I summarized it basically right, or have I gone astray somewhere?
You've summarized it perfectly. When we did the conventional and we compared it to the cluster, if the planning board felt that the conventional was the better plan, then yes, we would not be here before your board. But the planning board has felt that the cluster is the more preferable plan, and they then said that they would like us to pursue the variances. Now, at the last planning board meeting last week, we did have a further discussion with the board. The board did vote to send I don't know if it's favorable or recommendation to your board. They are, I believe, drafting that up. They will talk about that at their next meeting and hopefully send that to you after that. I don't know what it's going to say per se, but I know that they are going to be sending you some correspondence to that regard. They did want to see how our first presentation did go. So they'll probably be watching this and incorporating that into a letter that you will receive next month, most likely.
Okay, so David, I guess what I was going to end with was one of our jobs as a ZBA, is to find the least required variance, right? I mean, that's one of our goals is to develop the land in a way that is really in conformance with our code. So when we do move to the cluster development, that's what's really causing the variances, and the applicant really has no preference. It appears one way or the other. They'll go either way. They have not expressed any preference either financially or any other reason to go one way or the other than the fact that they're being directed by the planning board. So if part of our job as an appeals board is to select a development plan that has the least amount of variances, then we're being asked to do something other than that, correct?
Well, it's not quite, I hear what you're saying. It's not quite that you're directed to provide the least variances required. It's the least if the applicant meets the criteria for the granting of an area variance, it's then your duty to grant only the variance that is the lowest variance necessary to achieve the benefit sought. So you're right, but just with a little bit of a twist to it. And so, a cluster development is also pursuant to code, and there's certain, requirements, that come with the cluster development that don't apply to the conventional. Both are permitted under the code. And I think what we're going to hear from the planning board, if I have my crystal ball out, is that from a planning perspective, they're going to give you a letter that says these are the planning reasons why we choose to go, why we've chosen to direct the applicant towards a cluster development. And now, now you're in that world where that's what the application is, and you have to examine the application in the light that a cluster development is permitted, but there are area variances that are going to be required for that to proceed in that fashion. It's not as though you're duty bound to deny the cluster development because they need area variances, because there's another alternative in terms of being able to do it with a conventional subdivision. I don't think the law would put you into a box like that. I don't think that's the intent.
Okay, makes sense. We should really hear from the planning board what the benefits are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Also-
Clearly open space is important, and preserving the natural environment. So that's a plus, but it would be good to hear from them, since there's they've been having workshops and working hand in hand.
Yeah. It's the quality of the open space also that matters. If this lot's already been clear cut, what's the benefit to the open space?
Well, either way, we have an applicant before us, before this board. The application has been submitted. The process is underway. You're going to be duty bound to look at it and apply your New York State town law criteria to it. You're going to hear input from the planning board, and you can take that into account. And I wouldn't get too far ahead of yourself at this stage. I would say, usually at this stage, it's let's take a look. Is the application complete? Do we want to object or consent to the planning board serving as lead agency? Deal with that first, and then after you deal with that, all right, are we ready to open a public hearing, or is there further information that we want to hear from the applicant before we open the public hearing? There's some new document that we need as a condition to even scheduling a public hearing. I'm not sure that I'm hearing anybody requesting anything like that. I think the board would probably want during the public hearing at some point to get a copy of that easement document that I asked about earlier. And John said that he would provide that. So I think that would be important for the board to consider at some point, but that's not a legal impediment to you opening a public hearing. So I think those are the issues that are before you right now, step by step.
Okay, so I don't think we're ready tonight to schedule this thing for a public hearing yet. I think we need to go back and forth a little bit, hear from the planning board, give them our thoughts, because we're not on the critical path here, right? We can't even make our decision until after the planning board closes out secret.
That's correct.
We've got months ahead of us, I would imagine. So, I guess tonight the only thing that we have to act on and take a look at was the planning board's notice for lead agency, and I personally don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's the right board to have lead agency over an application like this. Does anybody else on the board have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree fully.
I agree, Mike. What's left to do? Can I just make a motion? Does anybody want to make a motion for Mike to fill out the forms and approve?
Yeah, the Yeah, Austin, the motion would be to consent to the town of Monroe Planning Board to serving as lead agency and to authorize Chairman Murphy to sign the form and return it to the planning board, so indicating.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of
Clarify one
words.
thing. I just want to clarify one thing. You're looking for 17% open space? Oh,
Correct.
It says 20, but
It's 20, okay.
yeah.
No, it's 17. It's 17.
17. Okay, so that's got to be corrected on the application.
Yes.
Application says 20.
Yeah.
But that may change again as this thing continues with the planning board. Who knows?
That's
So-
right. That's why we're doing the coordinated review rather than.
Yeah, we'll perfect that before we get to the end point.
Correct.
I don't remember. I don't remember what David said, but I'd like to make a motion for Mike to consent to the Town of Monroe Planning Board. Consent to the Town of Monroe Planning Board to be in the lead agency for the secret review and to charge ahead with completing the application. Not the application, but completing the form that they forwarded over. And
That's it. That's the motion.
That-
That's a
that
good
does it.
motion.
yeah,
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Can I sign the form for Mike?
It's usually, yeah, if Mike can authorize you to sign his name, typically it would be signed by the chairman as the authorized representative of the board. I think it's form over substance
Yeah.
to suggest otherwise. So
In this instance, Noreen, for the sake of expediency, I would grant you the permission to sign on my behalf.
Okay,
By the
I'll
time
put
I
my
get to-
initials next to it.
very good.
Okay. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, John, for introducing us to the project, and we'll see you in a few months, I guess.
Yes, we'll go a little further with the planning board, and hopefully they'll send you correspondence back, and then we'll reappear before you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, John.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good
John.
night,
Good night.
Lipa, if you're
Good
still there.
Night, Noreen.
Good night, John. Just picking on Lipa.
Okay. So with that matter out of the way for now, the next item on the agenda is the Verizon application for a use variance on the parcel on Bar Lane in the Meadow Glen townhouse development. Would the applicant for the or the representative for the applicant like to make an opening statement tonight? Oh, before we go there, just one more thing. I see that we have a lot of people online at this meeting tonight, and I appreciate your attendance. But I also want to remind you that the public hearing was closed last month, and while you're completely welcome to listen in on tonight's proceedings, the public hearing has been closed. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott Olson for some opening remarks.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just want to thank the board right now for its patience and its just consideration over the last, I don't even know, 4 months, 5 months now. Obviously, there have been some pretty extensive public hearings, and the board has been very careful to, review in detail what we've been doing. As you know, the project has changed substantively since we first proposed it. We first proposed a standalone, what we call the wooden utility pole structure that would be in front of the water tank. And after a couple of months of discussion, we ended up agreeing basically to install the antennas on the water tank and have the ground equipment still be located on the ground. That was the result of pretty extensive balloon tests. I think that we showed the various on-site alternatives that was the least intrusive alternative that was available. And as you know, and your council has told you the standard, basically we have to demonstrate to you that this is the least intrusive alternative. Once we do that with a couple of other things, it's, there's not a lot that can be done about it because there are no more or less intrusive alternatives. We've had very extensive discussions about other offsite alternatives. And I won't go into those again, but obviously, and I saw Mr. Edwards was present. He had a lot of comments and I think was very much in agreement with Mike Crosby from Verizon Wireless that those other potential offsite alternatives were just not feasible in order to accomplish what our target goal was. So I think in a summary, that's where we are. We're looking forward to going forward with the co-location on the water tank. And, we're still here. We have Mike Crosby, Sarah Coleman, Kathy Pomponio from the Verizon team, so that if you still have any further questions, we're here to answer them tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Rick, do you have any final remarks on this application for us tonight?
Thank you for letting me join the group here. We have, I think everybody spent a lot of time on this application, and a lot of the things we've done is to look at everything as best it can be done. And the objective was to find as described, the least disruptive, the least impactful process. And clearly, this is the least of all of them because first of all, Verizon has the right under federal law to develop their networks. No community can stop that from happening. And I think Verizon has been extremely patient themselves and working with everyone over this period of time because we've done a lot of these applications in the past, and this is as patient as I've seen any applicant during the process. But at the same time, I'm not supposed to give a lot of accolades to the applicant in this case, but I do have to say that they were cooperative in this effort. But as far as the site, everything about it is superior to what could be with the attachment to the water tank. If it weren't attached, there's so many other options that would be left to other carriers and to others that would impact visibly and impactful in more ways than just that in the area. I don't think people are going to really see this once it's built. If it's done well, and I have every reason to think it will be, it's going to be virtually, I'm not going to say impossible. You'll have to look for it, but you'll have to look for it to see it. And that's the intent of what we eventually came to the conclusion that it could be. So that's all I've got. If anybody's got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them as I can.
Well, thank you, Rick, for that overview. I think we've gone through all the questions we've had. You've been very helpful to us through this process and, leading us through the way on the technical front. We appreciate that. So with that,
How do you want to run this, Mike?
Yeah, so let me give you procedurally where you're at. The public hearing's closed. We've got, ordinarily you'd have 62 days to make a decision. If the board feels comfortable, you could discuss it amongst yourselves, certainly, in this open meeting, what your thoughts are amongst yourselves. Consider it. I would recommend that if you can come to a consensus, you do so at this meeting. First, you'd have to deal with SECRA, and then you could make it a motion could be made to approve or deny it, a resolution approving or denying it. There is a shot clock. I don't remember when it is, but it's within a short period of time after this meeting. So if you can come to consensus this meeting, I would suggest that you do so.
okay, thank you, David. So what we have before us tonight are two actions that we have to consider. One is the secret determination, as David mentioned, and the other is the ultimate determination of whether to grant or deny this variance. And board members, you've been provided with, you know, our draft statements here for both topics. You know, we should probably go through the SECRA determination first. At the last meeting, we did go through the long form EAF with the applicants and the public present, and we asked them questions. We got the answers that, you know, clarified the answers that they had in their SECRA form. We have been provided also through our council with parts 2 and 3 of the EAF, you know, for our consideration. And what we have here is a resolution of secret determination for the use variance application of Orange County Poughkeepsie Limited Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless. And, you know, we're all familiar with the history of the case. And, you know, there was a set of findings here. The application for the use variance is an unlisted action under SECRA. And the board has conducted an uncoordinated review of the potential adverse impacts on the environment. This board has reviewed part 1 of the short form EAF provided by the applicant, along with submittals by the applicant, thereafter providing additional information in support of its certain answers set forth and said previously submitted part 1 EAF. The board has taken a hard look at all relevant areas of environmental concerns set forth in EAF part 2, and in particular, we find the following. Item 1, the proposed action will not create a material conflict with the adopted land use or zoning regulation. The property is already in use for a significant public utility purpose, with the site containing a 1.5 million gallon, 62-foot tall water tank, which has been in place since approximately the year 2000. The addition of 2 small cell antennas on the existing water storage tank in the manner proposed is consistent with using the property for public utility purposes. Additionally, the mere fact that using the property for public utility purposes, additionally, the mere fact that a variance is requested does not mean that a moderate to large impact may occur in regard to the variance application. Is not a type 2 action. Under SECRA would require an environmental impact statement, which is not required by existing zoning law in practice. So basically, I'll go through, you know, the list of findings here, but I think that the important part of this is, you know, we started out with an application that I think we were all, you know, taking a negative view of, and that was the 70-foot tall micro cell tower that was on a wooden utility pole. And we felt that that really was intrusive to the neighborhood. And the applicant has listened to us during these many months of meetings, and they've listened to the public, and they've come up with a solution for mounting the antennas to the tank that's out there. It's a huge tank. It's been there. It services the Meadow Glen community. And this is going to be, you know, all of the antennas are going to be mounted high on the tank. All of the wires leading to those antennas will be painted and covered in the same color as the tank itself, so that we've taken every step we can to minimize the visual impact of this cell tower installation. So we no longer have a cell tower installation. What we have is a cell antenna installation against an existing water tank. And I think that really is the best outcome we could have hoped for. You know, and looking at the environmental impacts of this property, the amount of construction that's taken place out here is not creating any large impervious area that's going to change the runoff patterns in the area. The traffic that's going to be coming to this site is very limited because it's really just the Verizon maintenance vehicles. They said they're going to be out there maybe once a month, maybe more often than that. Certainly there'll be a construction period in the beginning where there will be some traffic, but long term, there's going to be very little traffic generated by this use. There's no clearing of any land as this site is already a utility service site, and whatever clearing was done in the past. The site is surrounded, it's all fenced in with the water tower, and it's surrounded by landscape plantings, large trees of various types, so that, you know, over the course of time, you're always going to have some greenery there, because it is there are evergreens in the mixture of trees that surround this site. There's no impact to any critical environmental areas. Level of traffic. Proposed significant increase. Proposed action will not result on existing water supplies or wastewater treatment utilities. The proposed action will not cause any significant impact to the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources. The proposed action will not result in any adverse change to natural resources. There are no existing wetlands on the site. While there are wetlands on adjacent parcels, the proposed project will not impact any of those existing wetlands. The proposed project will not result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems. And the proposed action will not create a hazard to environmental resources or human health permitted to be considered by this board. So, you know, that's just kind of briefly going over the secret impacts. And truly, the biggest one that we had here was the aesthetic impact to the neighborhood, and also the potential hazard impact of having a 70-foot tower directly across the street from townhomes. We've eliminated the tower and have greatly reduced the visual impacts. So I think in that regard, you know, that our findings is that the environmental impacts here are minimal, and that this project does not need to have an environmental impact statement issued on it. So considering, you know, all the foregoing, the board has completed the parts 2 and 3 of the EAF, and for reasons set forth, this use variance application as amended during the public hearing will result in no adverse significant impacts on the environment, and therefore an environmental impact statement need not be prepared, and a negative declaration is hereby issued. So would the board like to discuss any of that before we take a motion on the resolution here?
I think it's all been self-explanatory. I mean, I think that's a good explanation of the environmental form, and you know, I don't think we have any issues with not issuing a negative declaration.
Okay.
Mike, this is Austin Side. I'm satisfied with what you've described, and I don't need to hear anything additional on the matter.
That was pretty clear.
Okay. So would anybody like to make a motion to adopt the negative declaration for the secret process that we've followed?
I'll make a motion to adopt a negative secret that we've done.
Thank you, Vince.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So motion carried. Okay. Thank you. Now, the next item of business is the resolution or a decision on granting of the use variance for this application. And, you know, as we know, this use variance is generated because the town of Monroe has a utility tower overlay zone that only covers 5 small spots throughout the entire town. And Verizon Wireless is already on the nearest tower that's allowed within the town. And that doesn't satisfy the needs for this area. So they're looking to apply this use variance to this lot that is not in one of those 5 small selected spots throughout the town of Monroe. And I think, you know, from the position of the ZBA, as these towers continue to come into town, we're going to continue to have these types of applications, and we really have to give each one of them a very hard look. They're all unique unto themselves. This one has really proven that they could adapt their technology in the least impactful way to this particular site, which is surrounded by residences. And that's not lost on this board. This board really paid close attention to the fact that this cell tower is sitting there in a townhouse development containing 200 residential units. And you know, we listened to everybody's concerns. We agreed with a lot of those concerns, and we pushed this applicant to do the best job that they could. So I think where the board is tonight, and I'd like to, you know, put it out there, is to adopt a resolution for.
And Mike,
granting.
before we adopt the resolution, could we have some discussion on it?
Sure, absolutely.
You know, and this has been a long process. It's been, you know, the better part of a year. And I think, you know, we want the public to understand the amount of work that we put into this and that we didn't do it lightly. It was a lot of work. We, you know, had many public meetings. We, you know, we actually negotiated a lot of compromises with Verizon by removing the tower and co-locating, you know, the solution. You know, I think we did, you know, we sufficiently performed our duties in this respect. Just from, you know, my point of view, and it's, you know, I think this is when we should be discussing this because, you know, we do need to understand certain people's intentions. And, you know, I don't think it's been a secret necessarily that I've been somewhat opposed to this process or opposed to the approval of this variance, you know, pretty much not from the beginning, but even after all of the, you know, analysis that we've done. You know, my concerns are such that, you know, we do have a current zoning law and we do have overlay districts. Understandably so, there are issues with that. I mean, we talked about it once. You know, I think that the current overlay districts were established in like 1986. You know,
That's
so
correct.
they weren't revised when, you know, when they revised the zoning codes. So I think 34 years is a long time in terms of a lot of changes that have happened technologically. And I do understand the need to have capacity and coverage increases. And I do totally support a review of our zoning code to try to understand what is the best way that we can attack this in the 21st century. You know, everybody should have access to wireless, high-speed wireless services. I mean, especially with the pandemic that we're just going through, telecommuting, teleconference calling, you know, telemedicine, it's going to be something that's required. And I would want to be involved in trying to understand how the town of Monroe can look at our entire zoning code as it relates to the overlay districts or, you know, utilities, and understand where the best places we could do to locate things and, you know, do all of that. And the reason I bring all of this up is that, you know, I know we're going to go through a resolution, but I do want to state that my intention is to vote no to approve these variances. And my reasons are varied. And I don't know if it's, you know, I think it's something that I'm incumbent to kind of speak about. And it has to do with the fact that we do have a current zoning law. And if anybody wants to come to our board and petition for a variance for a particular use, they can do that. We hold public hearings and we, you know, we treat the process in that respect. The issues I have with this particular variance request is it's not a typical one that we usually get, where it's a side yard setback or it's this or that. And my issues around this are, this is something that involves a big deal for the town in terms of how we approach allowing access for wireless services and such. And, you know, to me, that's one of the biggest issues. The alternative site analysis, I think it was great. It didn't identify a better solution apparently, but even any alternative site was going to require a variance. It's away from what we're doing. So as that, you know, as it relates to that, you know, that I had an issue with that. You know, the other issue I did have, and it's a concern, it's a real one, and Rick Edwards is the one that included it in his report around, you know, provider discrimination. And it's something I'm really concerned about is that, we approve this variance and we lose some power as it relates to future applications as it relates to these types of services. I mean, it's not, I'm fearful that potentially maybe this one facility on the co-location on the tower, it could become 2, it could become 3. I mean, we lose a little bit of our power in terms of, once it's approved, in terms of how we can control some of that. The other thing that I'm also, concerned, an issue of mine is that these transponders are obviously going to be co-located on the water tower. They're also located within a densely populated residential community. I understand they're going to be the same color. They're, potentially we're mitigating, the aesthetic sides of it, but the residents of this community have spoken. I mean, we had a petition signed by 100 residents, 30, 40 residents spoke at the public meeting. They retained 79 residents retained an attorney to address these issues. So, that weighs a lot with me. The public, the public comment, is something that I'm very interested in. I think we've heard them loud and clear. So, like I said, I think everybody is presented and, themselves in a very professional manner. Mr. Olson, Mr. Crosby. I mean, I think, we've had, I've seen that you operate at a very high professional and technical manner. And, I commend you on that. I think for those other reasons, I'm one board member. So obviously I'm interested in my other board members' opinions. And, my statement in the vote I'm going to do is alone. It's not intended to disparage the opinion of any of my fellow board members if they disagree with my conclusion. But I think after weighing all of those, all the information and all the analysis, I think the cons outweigh the pros in this case. And, I don't really think this is the right solution right now for this. And obviously I'm interested in other people's opinions, but, my intention is to vote, no on a motion to grant this variance.
All right, thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. Kevin or Austin, any thoughts?
Mike, this is Austin Side. I have no additional thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Can they make that go higher than the tank? Can they make that antenna go higher than the tank?
No, I don't believe so, because that's one of the conditions that we have in our resolution of approval. We have before us tonight is a resolution of approval with 16 conditions, and I'll read through all 16 conditions.
I didn't see the condition. Hold on.
That we're considering, and maybe I'll just read through them now before we put it to a vote on the floor, so that we can go through those 16 conditions and everybody's aware before we take a vote and so forth. So the conditions that would go along with granting this variance is that this approval is expressly subject to the review and site plan approval by the Town of Monroe Planning Board. That's a given. The small cell antennas shall be co-located on the existing water tank by strapping them to the exterior perimeter of the water tank, not extending above the current height of the water tank, and shall be painted and maintained to match the exterior color of the tank. The location and method of attaching them shall be in substantial compliance with the plans demarcated as S2, S21, and S25 as submitted with the visual resource evaluation from August 28, 2020. That's basically, those were the pictorials that showed the antennas mounted to the side of the tank. The facility shall be attached to the sides of the existing water tank via strapping of the directional antennas at an elevation of approximately 65 feet above grade with interconnecting cables to the electric ground equipment. All related Verizon equipment shall be color matched to the water tank. It limits the height and the coloration of the equipment. The electronic ground equipment shall be located as advised by the planning board, preferably close proximity to the water tank. The ground equipment shall be surrounded in all visible directions by shrubbery, landscaping, or other approved concealed methods that shall be properly maintained in a manner and at such times as to be determined by the town planning board. So that's some additional shrubbery for screening the ground structures, in addition to what's already out there that screens the entire site. The application shall at all times maintain the cell facility in a like new and safe working condition. And if the maintenance of the same is to be contracted out to any person or entity other than the applicant shall provide the name of the maintenance company, a memorandum of the contract, and an address, email address, and phone numbers of all maintenance companies. So that's keep continued coordination, communication with all maintenance people. The applicant shall provide a plan for the removal of the applicant's proposed antenna and accessory structures and for restoration of the site should the service be discontinued. And such removal and restoration shall be accomplished promptly after the discontinuance of the use. So basically a decommissioning plan. Once this thing has lived out its useful life, it's going to be taken off the side of that tank, and all ground equipment that will be removed, and those features will be fixed. All vehicles dispatched to the project site on behalf of Verizon cell facilities, whether they be construction or regular maintenance vehicles, shall not park on Bar Lane, which is a private residential road. All vehicles servicing the antenna site shall park within the bounds of the fenced-in area of the Village of Harriman water tower site. Any damage or deposition of debris, sediment to Bar Lane caused by Verizon construction or regular maintenance vehicles shall be repaired and removed by Verizon. Repair of said damages shall occur within 30 days. Cleanup and removal of debris and sediment shall occur within 48 hours of the incident. Verizon shall take all necessary precautions to avoid damaging or depositing sediments onto Bar Lane. Such precautions may include, but are not limited to, maintaining proper gravel driveway surfaces from the edge of Bar Lane into the fenced-in area of the water tower site, avoiding the transport of heavy construction equipment over Bar Lane roadway, or other preventative measures directed by the town engineer or building code enforcement officer. Number 11, the ground-based structures to be installed for the housing of the electronical panels shall be finished in roofing and siding materials to match the styling of the Meadow Glen townhouse structures or with such other design that the town planning board shall require in connection with the site plan approval. Number 12, any ground surface disturbance of the project site caused by initial construction or site conditions, including finished lawn surfaces, gravel or paved driveways of the site, and site vegetation such as trees and shrubbery that exist or are to be planted as part of this installation shall be maintained consistently with the approved site plan. Number 13, Verizon or its agents shall notify the Meadow Glen Homeowners Association of all site visits for initial construction and ongoing maintenance visits. Such notice shall be communicated to the HOA at least 48 hours before entrance to the site. Notification may consist of written communication, telephone calls, or emails to the HOA representative. The HOA shall provide Verizon with the primary points of contact information. Verizon shall conduct site visits and construction operations only during regular business hours from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays, Monday through Friday, or at such times as the planning board may impose in connection with the site plan review and approval. No site visits shall be conducted on national holidays. Site visits for emergency purposes may be conducted outside of this time frame with concurrent notice to the HOA or as otherwise limited by the planning board in connection with the site plan review and approval. Number 15, the applicant shall pay all dues, fees prior to issuance of any building permits or certificate of use or occupancy. Number 16, the applicant shall comply with all other applicable laws, rules, regulations, and obtain any and all other required permits, including sewer, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The variance granted on the conditions imposed is the minimum necessary and adequate, while at the same time preserving and protecting the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So those are the 16 conditions that would be placed on our condition of approval. Haven't heard those 16 conditions. Do any of the board members have any questions or would like to go over anyone in particular?
This is Austin Side. I reviewed the conditions previously and I have no additional questions.
Thank you, Austin.
I have no additional questions.
Peter?
I have nothing else.
Okay. Okay, so that being the case, I would like to make a motion to approve the use variance for this site with the 16 conditions as just read out here, which are codified in a memo that our attorney has prepared for us for this resolution. So,
Yeah, if I might, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, the resolution sets forth the evidence upon which the determinations would be based. So it's a motion to pass that resolution and adopt those findings, approving the variance on the conditions set forth therein.
yes. Thank you for pointing that out, David. And that's in the preceding 12 pages in this memo or the conditions of the decision document. So with that clarification, I would like to make a motion to approve the use variance for the Verizon cell tower site at the Meadow Glen townhouse community with those 16 conditions to be met, and also, with the next step being going to the planning board for site plan approval. Does anybody want to second that motion?
Austin Side, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Austin. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
For the reasons stated before, Peter Lewis votes no.
Kevin Scully votes no.
Okay, so we do not have a fifth member of the board with us tonight.
So we have a failed motion with no action having been taken.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in, I don't know if this is going to help at all, but I just wanted to address, Peter, your one of your comments. And everyone on the board has been fantastic to work with, and I understand the situation you're in. But you mentioned that this is not a typical variance, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. My guess is you've probably never seen a variance like this. So we did our best to set forth what the law is, because again, your typical variance, you're dealing with the unnecessary hardship standard. We tried to explain from the beginning, that's not the standard that gets applied. Basically, the standard that gets applied is a standard that came out from the New York Court of Appeals in Rosenberg in 1993. And what it says is, if we demonstrate that there's a service gap, and if we demonstrate that this site that we're proposing serves that gap and remedies it, and if our site is a minimal intrusion to the community, that, the variance is supposed to be approved. Now, obviously, you have set forth a bunch of conditions. So I guess I'm just wondering out loud where we go from here if this motion fails. To us, if this application doesn't get approved, again, we've set forth kind of what our position is. And if we demonstrate that this is the least least intrusive means or available, which your consultant has agreed with. Under federal law, we could argue and likely win, under the Telecommunications Act. I don't enjoy talking about this. It's kind of awkward in a way, but I've got to let you know where we're coming from. While I certainly appreciate your contemplation, your thoughtfulness, my appeal would be, please try to also focus on the law, because ultimately that's what's gonna be applied, I guess. So just wanted to add that to the record if I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mike Crosby. I'm wondering if I could add just one quick note as well. And
Certainly, Mike.
I just wanted to, Peter, I was listening to, the words, and what was going through your mind as far as your positioning. And I just, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking back to the early part of my career, which was actually prior to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which was during the era of which you referenced the law for your town as far as, tower overlay districts are concerned. And one of the things I wanted to, went through my mind when I was listening to that was how much things have changed since then. And I just wanted to make a note that during the period of time that you're referencing, where your law came from, as wireless carriers, we used to, and as engineers for the wireless carriers, we were required to take federal anti-collusion training, which meant we couldn't even talk with the other carriers about co-locating. And in the case of, like if there was a tower to be built in Monroe at that time, we actually were not even allowed to co-locate with each other. We had to find separate locations. Co-location prior to 1996 was the exception to the rule, whereas the Telecom Act of 1996 promoted co-location. And at that same time, the industry changed dramatically. So much has changed since then. So to have an antiquated law that's not in the spirit and intent of what the federal government and FCC intends for network densification, that's a stark contrast to what those old laws are being referenced. So while I'm not trying to, portray any disrespect to the town law, I just want to try to draw a reference to how outdated that is. And I think that was mentioned and understood, but at the same time, it's just not something that applies to the post 1996 world. So I just wanted to mention that it was just from such a different time in this business. And I was there and I've seen it transition over the last 26 plus years as I've worked in this business. I work in dozens, if not more, towns across New York State. And to the situation that you're in, where you're weighing that, it's really unfair to you to some extent, because really we should be focused on, as Scott mentioned, the gap in service and trying to resolve that gap with the minimal intrusive way to do so, which we have done so in this process. So thank you for considering that.
No, absolutely. And I don't come to this decision, without a lot of soul searching and thinking and analysis of what we've all talked about. And, I don't know what, it seems like there's a talk of legal hot water and things like that. But, when I look at this, I just don't think this is the right project right now. And I'm not going to say that, the residents' outcry is obviously, important to me. I understand what you're saying. There's potentially legal ramifications. I'm not, I don't, but I'm trying to do what I think is the best thing for the town of Monroe, and in the end, there was not one, other than the Verizon folks, wanting to do this for the reasons that they're stating. There was complete opposition from the community and from, there was not one, comment in the public, testimony that was in favor of doing this within their neighborhood. So, I mean,
or even indifferent.
So that's kind of how I got to this point. I mean, I'm not, I don't, if it's not, I mean, it's Dave, I asked Dave to, maybe weigh in, and, I don't know what the process is from here.
Well, it certainly, it's an extremely complicated legal spot that you find yourselves in as a board right now. I could address it in an attorney-client session, but I could tell you, generally speaking, a failed motion is no action. So right now, there's been no action. There's been a motion that failed. There has not been a motion to deny. And so the application is not denied. It's not granted. It's just in limbo right now. And where you find yourselves is in a spot where a failure to act within the 62 days is going to be a default denial. But the provisions of the Telecommunications Act require a denial to be supported, like an approval, to be supported by findings with substantial evidence. I can say I've never come across a situation like this, so I don't know. I'd have to do some legal research on where we find ourselves right now. And then with the added complicating factor of the shot clock, I don't recall exactly where we stand on that.
I think it's November 10th. I think it's November 10th.
And November 10th, if November 10th is that's the day, that's going to be before your next meeting. So, you can have some further discussion tonight in open session to see if you can gain a consensus. If you want to hear more of my legal thoughts, I can do them in an attorney-client session. Those are my thoughts in no particular order.
David, I'm thinking maybe if we have an attorney-client session, that might be helpful for the board members. Just, this is the first time we've been in this predicament with a application, not just because of the type of application it is, but just because of how the vote turned out,
Yeah, there's some legal advice on procedural issues that I can impart upon you. That might be that would be appropriate for an attorney-client privilege session, not involving the substance of the application at all. If you wished, and if you did wish that, you could make a motion. If you wanted to discuss more substantively in debate on the merits of it in open session, you could do that. It's really at your pleasure.
I think we've openly debated this for the past 9 months. I think where we are now is in a place where, we have to get some specific legal advice on how we move forward from here. We've heard every argument about this project from all sides, and I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and try to change Peter's and Kevin's mind, and do a revote. I mean, that's not my intent. I just want to understand, where we are as a board at this point in time. Now, the other thing that comes up is if we go into attorney-client privilege session now, we're doing this, via Zoom. So that
we would go into breakout rooms. We would go into a breakout room. The meeting, you'd make a motion to go into an attorney-client session, and then the board members only would go into the breakout room, which would be private and protected because of the attorney-client privilege. The meeting would still go on, and then when you come out of the attorney-client session, you come back out of the breakout room and make a motion to re-enter
the meeting.
Yes, and then you come back onto the open session.
Okay. So would anybody like to make a motion to go to attorney-client privilege session?
I'll make a motion to go to attorney-client privilege session.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so I'm gonna do a breakout room, and you should each get a hold on a second. Let's see. Hang on. What's going on here? sorry. They changed the interface on this. It's different than the last time I did it. So bear with me for a moment.
You could break that room, Joanne.
All right. Did you get an invitation for a breakout room?
I
Yes,
did.
as did I. Did I
Question
join?
is, if you don't see me come in there in a moment, here.
Peter, Austin, and I
So
are in there.
Did Kevin go?
Kevin's in. Then how do we make sure we're out of the other room? Hello? Lost. Hello, David?
I do. I just heard his voice on this one. He needs to hang up his phone. He can always just zoom back in again. I can't hear him on the computer anymore. I cannot anymore. All right, I'll call you if I hear anything. All right, bye.
I'm confused as to what's going on with all this silence right now. Can someone please brief me? This is really weird. Yeah, I hit unmute. Is anyone able to answer me in this call?
The board has stepped away for attorney-client privilege meeting. They will be back. Did you hear me, Tracy?
So they're in a private meeting in a public meeting.
No, they have stepped out of the public meeting and they are in a private meeting with the just the attorney and the board members.
And is our attorney present in the call?
It is not his place to be on that call. It is the town attorney and the town board members.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'm just really confused as to what's going on here. So I will mute myself again. Thank you.
They're discussing the project is all I can tell you. I'm the secretary for the board. I'm sitting here the same way you are. They are discussing different things and I don't know what they're discussing, but it is between the board members and the attorney only. And then-
Okay, I was just confused because the awkward silence was really
No,
weird.
I know. They did leave.
It's just
I don't
weird.
know how long they'll be gone.
Oh, we don't know how long this is going to go on.
Nope.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you.
They'll come back when they're done.
They
Okay.
mentioned, this is Satya, they mentioned 15 minutes.
It could be 15 minutes. Hopefully, it all depends. I don't know.
Could you please give clarification, which attorney? Is it Mr. David or is it Mr. Scott?
It is David, the town attorney. It's David McCartney and the 4 board members.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm still on here, Noreen, but I did mute myself, but you could just put up your hand if you need to talk to me.
Yes, I put up my hands, but it's not for you, it's for the chairman. If I'm allowed to speak, I have only few questions for him.
This is not a public hearing any longer. The public hearing was closed. So I don't know whether they announced in the beginning they will not be addressing the public.
I understand, but his 16 conditions are missing some clarification, that's the reason.
Okay, I don't know whether they'll review that. This is all new to me as well as it is to them.
Noreen,
Yes.
is this a normal process in a public in a meeting like this? The board members will go offline for some time and discuss some things and come back. Is this a normal procedure or?
It can happen, yes, it does happen when we have live meetings as well. It happens at the town board meetings, it happens at planning board meetings, it all depends on what they need to discuss. They do have the right to do this, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Noreen.
You're welcome. Anything else, let me know.
Mike, are you in yet? Oh, is that your number coming in?
Yes, I'm back in and on the telephone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'd like to bring the meeting back to order. We've
You should
completed
make a
our.
motion. You should first
Yeah.
make a motion to come out of attorney-client session.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to come out of attorney-client session.
I'll second the
Is there
motion.
a second?
the motion.
Thank you, Austin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Austin
Aye.
or Kevin?
Aye, Austin.
Okay, I thought Kevin. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. So everybody, thank you for being patient. You know, we found ourselves in a bit of a pickle here tonight with the way the first motion went. And, you know, I just like to amend my earlier resolution, the 16 conditions that I had mentioned earlier. I'd like to amend condition number 2, which is the small cell antennas shall be co-located on the existing water tank by strapping them to the exterior perimeter of the water tank, not extending above the current height of the water tank, and shall be painted and maintained to match the exterior color of the water tank. And then to add to it, in no event shall any part of the proposed facility extend above the height of the water tank, nor shall it protrude more than 5 feet from the side of the tank. The location and method of attaching them shall be in substantial compliance with the plans demarcated as S2, S21, and S25 as submitted with the visual resource evaluation dated August 28, 2020. So that amendment to that condition just kind of tightens the geometry on the placement of this antenna. It cannot be extended. Any part of that antenna, any additional equipment from that antenna cannot extend above the height of the water tank, nor shall it protrude more than 5 feet from the surface of the tank. So that thing is up close and tight to the tank and no higher than the tank. So that's how I would like to modify condition number 2. Then condition number 4 was in relation to the location of the ground equipment. The electronic ground equipment shall be located as advised by the planning board. In no event shall it be outside the fenced-in area of the water tank. The ground equipment shall be surrounded in all visible directions by shrubbery, landscaping, or other approved concealed methods, and shall be properly maintained in a manner and at such times as to be determined by the planning board. So we're just ensuring here that that no part of this facility will be located outside the perimeter of the fenced-in area on the parcel.
So Mike, Mike, are you based on the legal advice we just received from our attorney? Are you proposing some alternatives that we might want to consider as a group?
Yes, I I'd gladly ask you to, give me some feedback on those two alternatives and whether or not these alternatives help you determine differently or clarify any conditions that we enumerated here.
Okay.
So,
Could you read number 2 again?
sure. The small cell antennas shall be co-located on the existing water tank by strapping them to the exterior perimeter of the water tank, not extending above the current height of the water tank, and shall be painted and maintained to match the exterior color of the water tank. In no event shall any part of the proposed facility extend above the height of the water tank, nor shall it protrude more than 5 feet from the surface of the side of the tank. And that's the new language right there, that particular sentence. The location and method of attaching them shall be in substantial compliance with the plans demarcated S2, S21, and S25 as submitted in the visual resource evaluation dated August 28th, 2020. Now that document was the additional photo renderings that we had asked the applicants to do. And, in that set of photo renderings, there was the original tower in front of the tank, 70 feet high, the new tower or the alternative tower behind the tank at 110 feet high, and the third alternative, which was strapping the equipment to the side of the tank. And this condition, basically, we're saying that in no way, shape, or form shall those antenna or any of the associated elements of that antenna structure extend above the height of the tank or protrude more than 5 feet from the surface of the tank. So it's really tightening up that language, though, that there is no additional antennas or going higher than the tank, or, oh, well, we mounted the antenna here, but it's 10 feet tall and it sticks up over the top of the tank. So that's the tightening up of that condition on the geometry of the setting of the antenna. Any thoughts on that, board members?
It sounds a lot tighter than the previous one.
Okay.
Excuse me, before you go further, Dave, did you start the recording again when you came back?
It's still recording.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know whether you shut it off and then.
No, thank you. It continued to record the exterior meeting, not the breakout.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's the modification to condition number 2. Condition number 4 was in regard to the electronic ground equipment. The electronic ground equipment shall be located as advised by the planning board. In no event shall it be located outside the fenced-in area of the water tank facility. The ground equipment shall be surrounded in all visible directions by shrubbery, landscaping, or other approved concealment methods, and shall be properly maintained in a manner and at such times as determined by the planning board. So that's basically our note to the planning board to screen this, the ground equipment properly. Make sure that it's not visible to the local residents. So, we're addressing visual impacts both up high on the tank and down low on the ground. And I can tell you from experience, being on the planning board in past decades, that everybody was always focused on what's up high in the air that everybody could see, and they would often make a mess of the equipment on the ground, and you wouldn't notice it until you drove past the site and you saw that there were just sheds randomly thrown out there with their equipment in it, whatever way it fit in. Here, we're saying there's this one shed, and it's an open stand. It's a small stand from what they presented in the site plans, and that has to be located within the fenced-in area, and it must also be properly screened with landscaping. So, tightening up those two conditions of the resolution. Would anybody like to make a motion to, again, approve the use variance with these 16 conditions, with conditions number 2 and 4 being modified as I just described?
Hey, Mike, this is Austin Side. I think that those are good revisions to consider as a group, and I would like to make a motion that we approve the use variance based on the revised conditions, if that's okay with our attorney, that we're doing this.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, Austin.
I second the
Would
motion.
anybody like to second it?
I
Excuse me,
second the
Kevin.
motion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 I'm still a no. Peter Lewis is still a no.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So with the modified conditions, the resolution to grant the use variance has passed. And that concludes our work here tonight on this application. The applicant from this point is going to be going to the planning board for a review of the site plan, where the details will be further codified on a detailed site plan. And of course, to the building department in order to get the building permits to attach the antennas.
I just want to say on behalf of the applicant, thank you for everyone's consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I thank all the members of the public that, came to these meetings and had your voices heard. And we did hear what you said. And we had to look at this application, from the perspective of the 3 laws that apply. A, that the need for the additional service is there. B, that the installation satisfies that need, and C, that this is the least intrusive manner possible. As you know, we looked at a number of different sites. We had them go back and forth and show us the matrix of sites that they looked at and all their various solutions and even 3 different unique solutions right here on this site. And I believe that we've, in meeting the federal standards for satisfying the need for this site and minimizing the impacts to the community, I think this is the best that the plan that we could hope for from the ZBA. With that, this matter is completed here at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we wish the applicant luck in their process with the Town of Monroe Planning Board. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Okay, so the one last item we have on the agenda tonight is, if I can find the agenda. Doreen, we don't have any meeting minutes to review?
No, 3 meetings a month being so long, I'm a little behind.
Okay. All right, so the item that we did have as item 4 was lead agency notice for the planning board. We took care of that at the beginning of the meeting. So that really completes our business for this evening. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion.
Would anybody like second it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
For your
Thank you,
time.
everybody. Have a good
Thanks a lot.
night.
Night.
Bye-bye.